I'd been staring at the ceiling tiles above my hospital bed since 6:45 a.m. That's when the nurse, Stana, had gently shaken my shoulder and said with a warm smile, "You're going home today, Miss Harris." Home. The word should have lifted my spirit like a balloon. Instead, it sat heavy in my chest. My hip surgery had gone well. I was healing faster than they expected for someone my age, as if I was supposed to just crumble past 60. But the real recovery, the one no one talks about, was the quiet ache. I'd been nursing long before the surgery, the ache of being invisible to your own child. I reached for my phone and called Ethan. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Ma, everything okay?" "I'm being discharged today," I said, keeping my tone light. "They say I'm good to go home." A pause. Today? I thought it was next week." "Nope. Today, doctor just signed the papers." Another pause. I could almost hear his brain scrambling for an out. "Okay. Listen, I've got back-to-back meetings all morning. I might not be able to get away. But don't worry. I'll book you an Uber, okay?" I swallowed hard. "You can't come get me yourself." "Ma, you know how work is right now? Quarter close. Deadlines. Look, I'll set the ride now." "Yeah. Just wait by the main entrance." He hung up before I could reply. An hour passed. Then two. Nurses came and went, changing linens, delivering pills, offering fake smiles. I sat in a plastic chair near the automatic doors with my overnight bag clutched in both hands, my discharge papers neatly folded in my lap. Every time a black car pulled up, I sat straighter. Every time someone else got in, I wilted a little more. A volunteer offered me water. Another one offered to call someone. I smiled and said no both times. At 12:47 p.m., when the sun was high and the lobby had thinned out, I finally gave up and booked my own cab. The driver didn't speak much. Neither did I. What was there to say? That my own son couldn't spare 10 minutes for the woman who gave him life? I looked out the window as the hospital disappeared behind me, replaced by billboards, trees, and the distant blur of people living lives untouched by this kind of quiet heartbreak. But the punchline hadn't been delivered yet. As the cab slowed in front of my house, I noticed something wrong. There was a for sale sign in the lawn. I blinked. Maybe it was a mistake. Wrong address, wrong block. I stepped out, wobbling a little, gripping the door as the driver retrieved my bag. I hadn't even taken 2 steps before I saw my landlord, Mr. Green, walking toward me from across the street. "Oh, Mrs. Harris, I didn't expect you back." "Today? What's going on?" I asked, nodding at the sign. "Oh, Ethan didn't tell you." I narrowed my eyes. "Tell me what?" "Well, he said you were moving into assisted living, that you wouldn't need the place anymore. So we agreed to list it as soon as possible." My breath caught. Assisted living. He looked uncomfortable now. Said it was all arranged. Figured it was all discussed with you. I raised my hand to stop him. "It's okay. Thank you." I didn't want to cry in front of him. Not now. Not after all this. I walked inside. Everything was where I left it. But it felt cold, like someone had already erased me. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone. No missed calls. No messages. I clicked open my email and scrolled through the old lease agreement. Sure enough, I was still a co-signer on Ethan's apartment. When he first moved out, fresh from college and full of dreams, he needed someone to vouch for him. He didn't even have a job yet. I paid the deposit. Bought him his first furniture. Now he had forgotten the very hand that held him up. And suddenly stopped crying. A calm came over me, not cold, but certain. I picked up my small bag, packed a few more essentials, and booked another ride. This time to his apartment. If you've ever felt like a burden to the very people you raised, you're not alone. Subscribe for more real-life stories that speak the truth. No one dares to say. The cab driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "This the address, ma'am." I looked up. Ethan's apartment building towered above the street like a monument to new money. All glass, metal, and sharp corners. I remembered when he first got the lease here, how excited he was. How he'd texted me pictures of the rooftop view and marble countertops. I didn't respond to the driver. I just nodded and handed him a tip. My hip still ached slightly as I stepped out of the car, but the pain was dull now, replaced by something stronger. Not anger, not even grief, just resolve. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there, and I did. My name was still on the lease. The front desk security guard barely looked up, but I greeted him with a soft good afternoon. Anyway, old habits. I took the elevator up to the 17th floor. Every second felt like a lifetime. When the door opened, it wasn't Ethan standing there. It was her. Tasha, his girlfriend. She had that perfect influencer look, sculpted cheekbones, sleek hair pulled into a high ponytail, expensive leggings. That looked like they cost more than my rent. She stared at me like I'd shown up with a loaded shotgun. Can I help you? Smiled. Yes, I'm moving in. She blinked. I'm sorry. I stepped past her before she could close the door. My overnight bag rolled behind me. Is Ethan home? He's in a meeting. Perfect, I said, easing onto one of the bar stools by the kitchen counter. I'll wait. Hovered by the door like she was still deciding whether to call security. But she didn't. The apartment was immaculate. Granite counters, minimalist decor, not a single photo of family in sight. It smelled like lavender and something synthetic. Home without roots. A few minutes later, I heard a door open. Ethan walked out wearing wireless earbuds and a frown. When he saw me, his frown deepened. Mom, I raised an eyebrow, surprised. To see me, he pulled the earbuds out. You should have called. I did from the hospital, remember? He looked at Tasha, then back at me. I told you I'd send a car and it never came. I took a cab. Twice, actually. Ethan exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. Why are you here? I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch before I answered. Because someone told my landlord I was moving into a care facility. And because I still co-signed this place. When you couldn't qualify a loan? Tasha's mouth dropped open slightly. Ethan's face flushed. Okay, let's just calm down. I'm perfectly calm, I said, walking past him toward the guest bedroom. I'm not here to argue, just here to rest. Doctor says I shouldn't be alone right now. He followed me down the hall. Mom, this isn't how I know it's not how you planned, I said, turning to him. But neither was being left alone outside a hospital like someone's unwanted baggage. I opened the door to the guest room and stepped inside. It was cold, sparsely decorated, clearly just a backup space, a spare life. I set my bag down and turned to him. Don't worry, Ethan. I'm not here to make trouble. Just need a place to recover. This place seems big enough for the both of us. The next morning, I cooked breakfast. Not the smoothie bowls and protein bars they probably preferred, but real food, fried eggs, toast with butter, spiced tea like I used to make when Ethan was still small enough to sit on the kitchen counter. And tell me about dinosaurs. He walked into the kitchen in his robe, paused at the smell. What is that? Breakfast. Tasha walked in behind him, her face a mask of silent protest. I smiled at both of them. Don't worry, I made extra. You'll need the strength. They didn't sit. I didn't insist. I just sat down with my plate and started eating slowly. Stories like this aren't just stories. They're lifelines for people who've been forgotten by their own blood. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to smile through pain. By noon, I had organized the pantry. By evening, I had replaced their shallow throw pillows with real ones. Ones with padding and stitching and color. Ethan didn't say anything. He just watched. Tasha did, though, that night. I heard her whispering in the hallway. She can't just live here, Ethan. It's weird. She's watching us. She's recovering, he said. From what? Being dramatic? A pause. Then Ethan said something that made my stomach drop, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. She's never done this before. Never asked for anything. I think I owe her a few nights. I closed my eyes and let those words carry me into sleep. Days passed. I didn't ask questions. I didn't impose. I simply became part of the apartment's rhythm, a quiet presence. in the background of their carefully curated life. Each morning, I made breakfast. Whether they ate or not didn't matter. It was there, hot, ready, waiting. Each afternoon, I sat on the balcony, letting the sun warm my face as I read old books I'd once given Ethan, the same books he'd boxed up and tucked away in a corner. I unpacked them again, dusted off the covers, reclaimed space. Tasha still looked at me like I was an unsolvable riddle. She avoided eye contact, avoided conversation. But I wasn't here for her approval. Ethan, though he softened. Slowly, it started with him sitting at the counter while I cooked, scrolling through his phone. Then staying a few extra minutes to sip the tea I made. Then asking, "Remember when you used to pack my lunch with little notes?" I smiled. "You kept them in your Batman lunchbox." He looked surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember everything." That evening, I found a new towel folded neatly by my door, and a tiny flower vase on the nightstand. Silent apologies dot the next day. I heard him defend me, Tasha. She reorganized the entire spice rack. "I can't find anything." "Ethan, she's just trying to help. It's her way of adjusting." I didn't say anything, but I smiled too. Myself, as I washed the dishes. He was adjusting. A week passed, then two, and one morning. I came out of my room to find Ethan at the kitchen table alone, pale and looking shaken. He glanced up. "She left?" I paused. "Tasha." He nodded, said she needed space, that I've changed since you got here. I said nothing, he continued, voice barely a whisper. "She said she couldn't handle the guilt. That it felt like I was replacing her with you." I walked over and sat down beside him. "You're not replacing anyone, Ethan," I said softly. "You're just remembering who you are." He stared at the table. "I didn't mean to forget you, Ma. I just got busy, got selfish." I reached for his hand. "You don't have to explain. I've been a mother too long not to know when. My child is lost." He looked up, eyes red. "I left you at the hospital, and I came here," I said gently, squeezing his hand. "Because I knew this time you needed me. If you've ever had to forgive someone who forgot your worth, hit subscribe. Your story matters, and you're not alone." That night, Ethan made dinner. It wasn't great, the chicken was dry and the rice overcooked, but I ate every bite like it was a 5-star meal. Because it wasn't about the food, it was about the trying. He sat across from me, watching for my reaction. Nervous, like a boy who'd brought home a report card. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. After dinner, we sat on the couch and watched reruns of a show we used to watch when he was in high school. He laughed at the same parts he used to laugh at. And somewhere between the second and third episode, he fell asleep with his head resting on my shoulder. My son, my boy, the one I raised with lullabies and scraped knees, and late-night soup now full-grown, lost and found all over again. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. If Tasha would come back, if I would stay longer, the walls he had built would fall completely, or just crack enough to let light through. But I knew one thing for sure, he remembered. And that was enough for now. Ethan had left for work early. It was Saturday, but he'd taken on a last-minute client presentation. He kissed me on the cheek before heading out, a small gesture that felt monumental after everything. "I'll bring lunch," he said. "Real. Food, no takeout." I smiled. "I'll believe it when I see it." When the door shut, I stood quietly in the living room. The apartment was silent in that deep, thoughtful way mornings can be. The kind of silence that invites reflection. I wandered around with no particular plan. I watered the plant he always forgot on the window ledge. I folded the throw blanket he left crumpled on the couch. And then, as I went to put away a few dishes, I noticed something strange in the corner drawer of his kitchen, a small crumpled envelope, yellowed, frayed at the edges. My name was written on the front in Ethan's handwriting. But it was dated 2 years ago. I hesitated, then opened it. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this." It means I didn't have the guts to say it out loud, and I'm sorry for that. Know how to tell you I've been drowning. I moved out to prove myself, but I've just been pretending. The truth is, I miss you. I miss your calm. I miss the way you always knew how to fix things with tea and quiet and presence. But I've been terrible at showing it. I've been busy chasing numbers and forgetting faces. I even forgot birthdays. Yours twice. That's on me. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to become the kind of son who only remembers his mother when it's too late. But I'm scared you're already slipping away. I sat at the counter, the letter trembling in my hands. All this time, I thought I was the only one hurting. But this unread message hidden in a drawer, it held years of silent love and shame and regret. He hadn't forgotten me. He just didn't know how to come back. That night, when he returned with a brown bag of homemade lasagna, he claimed to have cooked, though it had a restaurant sticker on the side. I set the letter down on the table. I found this, I said simply. He stared at it for a long time before sitting down. I wrote that when I had a panic attack, admitted quietly. Thought about mailing it. Then I told myself, you'd just laugh. Or be disappointed. Why would I laugh? 'Cause I thought you were stronger than me. Like you never needed anything. Especially not from me. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. I always needed you. I still do. You think strength is silence? No. It's staying. It's forgiving. It's showing up even when the door's closed. He didn't speak. Just nodded, tears welling up. Then he said, I thought I was doing you a favor by letting you go. But maybe I was just letting myself off the hook. If you've ever written a message you've never had the courage to send, hit subscribe. This space is for the quiet ones who carry loud hearts. Later that evening, as we sat together watching the city lights from his balcony, Ethan said something I never thought I'd hear. Don't move back home. Stay at least a little longer. I chuckled. You're sure? I've rearranged half your cabinets. Good. Maybe you'll rearrange my life next. It was a joke, but it wasn't. He was opening up. Healing isn't a grand ceremony. It's not loud or sudden. Slow like soft music after a storm. It's like an old letter finally read. And sitting beside him, shoulder to shoulder, I knew we weren't just rewriting our relationship, we were remembering it. A week after I found the letter, life settled into a peaceful routine. Not perfect, no, perfection doesn't live in real life, but peaceful in the way only repaired relationships can be. Ethan had started waking up early just to have tea with me before work. He never used to be a morning person, and every night he'd bring home something, sometimes groceries, sometimes flowers. Once even a photo frame with an old childhood picture of us he dug out from a dusty box in storage. I put it on the kitchen shelf, right next to the spice rack I had reorganized, now labeled and color-coded. My little touches remained, but just when I started to believe the worst was behind us, there came a knock on the door. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was baking. The smell of cinnamon filled the apartment. Something Ethan always said reminded him of holidays when his father was still around, back when things were whole, or at least looked that way. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. And there she stood, Tasha. Hair sleek, lips tight, eyes full of something she hadn't said yet. I didn't know you were still here, Tashi said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door gently behind her. I'm recovering doctor's orders. She ignored the jab. Is Ethan home? No. He went to pick up a new kettle. Said he'd be back in 20. She glanced around. Place looks different. Not surprised. Sky raised the person. Who used to live here? That stopped her for a moment. Her jaw clenched. I came to talk to you, she said. Then talk. She hesitated. Sat down slowly on the edge of the couch like she didn't want to disturb the cushions. I was wrong, she said, about a lot of things. I leaned against the counter and folded my arms. Such as, about you. About your influence. I thought you were taking him away from me, and now I think you gave him back to himself. For the first time, Tasha looked vulnerable. Her voice wavered. I've never had a close family. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like When Ethan started changing, being more patient, more present, I panicked. I thought he was slipping away. I nodded slowly. Sometimes when people heal, they seem unfamiliar, even to the ones who love them. She blinked, almost startled by the gentleness in my tone. I never meant to come between you two, she whispered. I was just scared and prideful. And jealous, maybe? I understand, I said. You thought he had to choose. But real love doesn't ask for ultimatums. She nodded, then her voice softened, almost childlike. Do you think there's still a place for me in his life? I stepped forward and placed my hand gently on her shoulder. That's not for me to say. But if you're asking me, the mother, who once thought she'd lost her son, then yes, there's always room when there's honesty. Ever had to rebuild something from scratch? A relationship, trust, or even yourself? Hit subscribe. These stories are for the brave hearts that keep trying. Ethan came home minutes later. His eyes widened when he saw her. Tasha, I was just leaving, she said quickly, standing. I only came to talk, to clear the air. He looked at me, then back at her. Did you? She nodded. I did. And ... I miss you. Ethan didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he set the kettle down and walked over. I'm still mad, he said. Still hurt. I know, but I'm also tired of holding it. She looked at him, hope slowly blooming in her eyes. So maybe we take it one day at a time, he said. No guarantees. Just ... honesty. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen on her. Deal. After she left, Ethan and I sat together on the balcony again. He was quiet. Sipping tea, you handled that well, he finally said. I shrugged. I've had practice. Life gives you plenty of chances to choose grace over grudges. He turned to me. You think it'll work out with her? I took a long breath. It depends on whether she's willing to love the version of you that remembers who raised him. He chuckled. I think she will. I think I want her to. I looked at him. This man who was once a boy who cried when I dropped him off on the first day of school, who used to collect bugs in jars and give me handmade cards every Mother's Day. I reached over and took his hand. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you, even after everything, especially after everything. That night, I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Home, not because of the walls around me or the view from the balcony, but because my son had come back. Not with a grand apology, not with flowers or gifts, but with presence, with effort, with truth. And that's all I ever wanted. 3 weeks had passed since. I first stepped through Ethan's front door with trembling legs and a bruised heart. And tonight, he was cooking dinner, not takeout, not reheated leftovers, an actual meal from scratch. I peeked into the kitchen as he clumsily diced onions. Wearing the apron I had bought on a whim during our grocery trip a few days back, it said, "Kiss. The chef at your own risk." He caught me watching and grinned. Don't laugh. I watched 3 YouTube videos just to figure out how to peel garlic properly. I'm impressed, I said, slipping into a chair. You used to think frozen. Pizza was gourmet cuisine. He chuckled. Still do, but tonight's different. It was. Something in the air felt ceremonial, like we both knew this dinner meant more than it looked. A silent closing of a chapter neither of us wanted to revisit, but both of us had grown from. He lit a small candle at the center of the table, pulled out the chair across from me, served the pasta with trembling hands but pride in his eyes. I've been thinking, he said as we ate. Dangerous habit. He laughed. About how everything used to revolve around proving I didn't need anyone, especially not you. I didn't interrupt. He needed to say it and I needed to hear it. I think I mistook independence for isolation, he continued. Thought being a man meant pushing everyone away, working late, paying bills, making decisions without asking for advice. He paused and met my eyes. But when I left you at that hospital, when I looked at your name on the caller ID and turned my phone face down, I didn't feel strong. I felt small, like a kid who forgot how to be human. My fork stopped midair. Ethan, no. Let me say this. He leaned forward. You deserved better. Not just in that moment, but for years. You gave me everything, Ma. And when I had the chance to give even a fraction of that back, I failed. I failed big. I reached across the table, my hand covering. You didn't fail, you forgot. That happens to all of us. If you've ever had to rebuild trust with someone you love, click subscribe. These stories are your stories too. We heal here together. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full. Full of what hadn't been said for years. Full of acceptance. He broke it gently. Tasha and I were going to counseling. I blinked surprise. That's brave. We figured if we're going to try again, we'd better not pretend things are okay. They weren't. She told me she felt like she was living with a stranger. I think she's right. You were a stranger to yourself too, I said softly. He nodded. Exactly. But I want to change that. I want to build something real with her, with myself. And with you. There it was, the thing I didn't even know I was waiting for. An open door. After dinner, we cleared the plates together. He insisted on washing while I dried. Remember when you used to make me do this after dinner? He asked, handing me a plate. You always found a reason to disappear halfway through. I used to fake stomach aches. I know. You were a terrible actor. He laughed a full, genuine laugh that shook the room. Then he said, you staying changed more than just the apartment. It changed me. I folded the towel slowly. I didn't come here to change you. I came because I had nowhere else to go. I know. And I'm sorry you even had to feel that way. We stood in silence for a moment, the sound of water running filling the air. Then he dried his hands and turned to me. Will you? Stay a little longer, not because you have to, because you want to. I blinked back tears. Yes, I'll stay. Later that evening, we sat on the couch and watched a movie we used to love. He fell asleep halfway through, his head resting on a cushion, his breathing steady. I covered him with a blanket and walked into my room, but not before glancing around. Really? The apartment was still the same in many ways. Same gray walls, same old carpet, same humming refrigerator with the dent on the bottom. But the feel of it, different, warmer. Lived in, loved in. I opened my journal and began to write. The first time I'd done it in months. Tay, my son, cooked me dinner. Not because it was Mother's Day, not because I was sick, just because he wanted to. We laughed, we forgave, we remembered. I think this is what healing looks like. Messy, awkward, slow, but real. And tonight I finally feel like his mother again. I closed the journal, heart full. Sometimes it takes being forgotten to be remembered properly. And sometimes it takes moving into your son's apartment to remind him and yourself what love really looks like. When Ethan asked me to attend the family dinner with him, I hesitated. It wasn't fear of facing people. I'd lived too many years and worn too many scars to be shaken by side eyes or silence. But it was something deeper. A question that lingered in my chest. Would they see me as the burden I had once become? Or the mother I had always tried to be? Saw my hesitation, of course. You won't be alone, he said quietly, his hand brushing mine. And you're not the woman they think they remember. You're stronger now, and so am I. That was enough for me, so I said yes. The restaurant was packed with the hum of casual laughter, the clink of forks and glasses. We arrived just a few minutes late, enough to draw a few curious glances as we stepped into the reserved family section. Aunt Denise, always opinionated and rarely kind, raised her brows when she saw me. Uncle Marvin whispered something too. His wife, one cousin, avoided my eyes completely. I was the scandal, the punchline, the mother whose own son had once refused to pick her up. I felt it all in the air. But Ethan didn't let go of my hand, not even when the appetizers arrived, not even when the first passive-aggressive comment landed. Well, Aunt Denise said, with a tight smile, it's surprising to see you here. I'm surprising in many ways, I replied evenly, sipping my water, but thank you for noticing. She blinked. Ethan smirked. And I realized I wasn't shrinking anymore. We made it through the meal, and just as dessert was being served, Ethan stood up. Forks paused. Conversations died mid-sentence. He cleared his throat and looked around the table. I want to say something, he began. Oh no, I thought. Not here. Not now. But I didn't stop him. He turned toward his cousins, uncles, aunts, the people who had once cheered his graduation and whispered when I arrived. I've made a lot of mistakes, he said. Most of you know that. Some of you have judged me for them. It's fair. He looked at me. But the biggest mistake I ever made was forgetting the woman who raised me, who fed me when there was nothing in the fridge, who wore holes in her shoes so I could wear new ones to school, who stayed up every night while I cried about my first heartbreak. My chest tightened, and when she needed me the most, I wasn't there. Not because I couldn't be, but because I didn't want to be. Because I believed lies about strength and manhood and pride. You could have heard a pin drop. She moved in with me a few weeks ago, he continued. Not because it was convenient, but because I needed her more than I knew. He looked directly at Aunt Denise now, and I'm not ashamed of it. In fact, I'm grateful, because if it took my mother getting sick to wake me up, then I'm lucky she survived, because now I get to do better. If you've ever been judged for choosing your family or for coming back after leaving, hit subscribe. These stories are for those of us trying to do better, not perfectly. But honestly, Aunt Denise stared, speechless. Ethan sat back down beside me. His hand found mine again. I'm proud of you, I whispered, blinking away tears. I should have said it sooner, he replied. Uncle Marvin gave a slow nod. Even the cousin who'd been avoiding eye contact finally looked up and smiled faintly. Maybe nothing had changed. Maybe everything had. But I knew one thing for sure. I no longer felt invisible. After dinner, a few relatives approached to talk. Some asked about my health. Others mumbled half apologies. A few tried too hard to pretend like nothing had happened at all. I didn't mind. The ones who mattered heard what they needed to hear back. In the car, Ethan was quiet. He looked out the windshield, tapping the steering wheel gently. Too much? He finally asked. No, I said. It was just right. He smiled, looking relieved. I wanted them to know I see you now. I never stopped seeing you, I replied. He reached for my hand again, a silent promise. The next morning, I woke up to find a small envelope on the kitchen counter. My name was written in Ethan's familiar scrawl. Inside was a handwritten letter. Ma, I know there's no letter, speech, or gesture big enough to erase the day I left you waiting at that hospital. But I'm not trying to erase it anymore. I'm trying to rewrite what comes after. You're my mother. Not just by blood, but by sacrifice, by patience. By every small, thankless moment you chose me when no one else would. I hope one day I can be for you what you've always been for me. Love, Ethan. Tears spilled before. By even finished reading, not tears of pain, but release, healing. Hope. I made breakfast. His favorite, sweet toast with cinnamon and apples, and waited for him to wake up. When he walked in, hair a mess, shirt wrinkled, but eyes full of warmth, I held up the letter. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Too much? I shook my head and smiled. It's everything. He sat down at the table and took a bite, humming in approval. You always made this taste like home, Guy said. That's because it is home, I replied. Not a house, not a city. But this, two hearts, rediscovering each other. One mistake, one hospital. One apartment, a lifetime mended over cinnamon toast and second chances. I didn't realize how long it had been since he'd called me Mom until he said it again. Not Ma, not hey. Not silence followed by tension, but Mom. And not just once, but in the soft, unguarded way he used to as a boy. When he needed comfort or wanted to share good news, it happened on an ordinary Thursday. The day started with laundry and ended with life-altering warmth. That morning, I stood in the hallway folding towels. I just finished the last load, humming softly to myself. When Ethan emerged from his room, dressed in a crisp blue shirt and slacks, rare. Given his usual love for joggers and old band tees, he was holding a folder. "Job interview," he said before I could ask. "Marketing assistant position at a firm downtown." I raised my eyebrows. "You didn't tell me. Didn't want to jinx it," he muttered. "Been burned before." He adjusted the cuffs of his sleeves, glanced at the mirror, and sighed. "You look sharp," I said gently. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm proud of you, Ethan, no matter what happens in that room." He swallowed hard. Then, as he turned toward the door, he said it. "Thanks, Mom." It slipped out so naturally that it took a few seconds to register. But when it hit me, I froze. My hand still clutched a dish towel. Yet my heart held something far more fragile a moment I'd longed for without even knowing it. He didn't look back when he left. He didn't have to. I stood by the door long after it closed, whispering the word to myself. Mom. 3 little letters, one whole world rebuilt. He returned hours later with windblown hair and a strange look on his face. I couldn't tell if it was disappointment or disbelief. "Well," I asked, I think I got it," he said slowly. "They said they'll call tomorrow, but the way they smiled at the end, it felt different." I opened my arms without a word, and he stepped right into them. No hesitation, just my son, warm and solid, letting me hold him like I used to before the world taught him to push love away. That evening, we celebrated with store-bought cake and a small bottle of sparkling cider. We didn't need more. We sat on the balcony, paper plates in hand, watching the city lights flicker as the sun dipped low. "I didn't think I was ready," he said, "to grow up, to change, to admit I needed you." I didn't interrupt, but having you here, it's like you planted something I forgot was missing. "Roots," I said softly. He nodded. "Exactly. If you've ever found your way back to someone or been found by them, hit subscribe. These stories are for hearts that never gave up, even when everything else did." The next day, the call came. He got the job. He tried to act casual, but when he hung up, he whooped so loud he scared the neighbor's cat off the windowsill. I laughed harder than I had in years, and when he looked at me, eyes glistening, he said, "We did it, Mom." There it was again, that word, not tossed out in frustration or shouted in argument, but placed gently in the air between us like a gift. Over the next few weeks, things started shifting. He began waking up earlier, shaving more often, reading, emails with serious eyes and strong coffee. He called Tasha, not for drama or argument, but to talk, to listen, to rebuild. I watched from the sidelines, offering small nudges, warm meals, quiet prayers. One night, as he sat at the kitchen counter reviewing some documents, he asked, "Do you think people can really change?" I leaned on the counter. "I think people don't really change. They uncover, strip away all the layers life forces on them. The real you was always there. He just got buried." He looked up at me and smiled. "I like the person I'm becoming." "So do I," I said. "He reminds me of someone I used to know." Weeks turned into months. My room, once temporary, became permanent. We rearranged furniture, added a bookshelf, shared more meals than silence, laughed more than we sighed. The apartment felt like home, not because it was flawless, but because it was ours. One evening, Ethan came home with a small box. He placed it in my hands and watched as I opened it. Inside was a key to the apartment, he said. "I know you already live here, but now it's official. I want you here, not just as a guest, but as family." Tears prickled my eyes. This means more than you know." "No," he said. "I think I finally do know." Later that night, I found an old photo in a drawer, one of Ethan at age 7, standing in the kitchen in his pajamas, a mixing bowl in one hand and batter on his nose. I remember the day he insisted on making pancakes all by myself. It was a mess, a glorious, sticky, flour-covered mess. But it was also one of the happiest mornings of my life. I placed the photo on the fridge. When Ethan saw it the next day, he laughed. "I still can't cook. You're better at feeding souls than stomachs." I said. He grinned. "Must have learned from you, Mom." And there it was again. That word, not rare anymore, not rusty from neglect, but alive. And every time he said it, a part of me healed. We never talked much about the hospital day anymore. Not because we were avoiding it, but because we had outgrown the pain. It no longer defined us. We were writing a new story now together. One where the word Mom was not just spoken, but cherished. It was a quiet Sunday morning. When I woke up before Ethan, the sun was streaming softly through the blinds, painting golden lines across the apartment floor. I walked into the kitchen, barefoot, still in my robe, and started the kettle. I didn't need to do much these days. Ethan cooked, sometimes did his laundry without reminders, and paid the bills on time. The boy who once dodged my calls now asked me if I'd eaten lunch at work. We had found peace. But peace, I've learned, comes with a strange kind of silence. The kind that gently asks, "What now?" And I realized something. I had gotten so used to fighting for love, proving my worth, holding on to what little dignity I had left, that I didn't know how to live when I no longer had to fight. I sipped my tea and stared out the window at the city I once resented, now grateful for the second chances it had hidden in its alleyways. Maybe it was time to let go of the past. That afternoon, Ethan found me on the balcony, sitting with an old photo album on my lap. He sat beside me without a word. I flipped the pages slowly, baby pictures, birthday hats, messy smiles, and tear-streaked faces. "This one," I said, pointing to a picture of him as a toddler in overalls, "was the day you learned to say sorry. You'd broken your toy car and blamed it on the dog." He chuckled. "Poor Max. He forgave you, and so did I." We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked, "Do you ever think about that day at the hospital?" He shifted. "I do, but not with guilt anymore. Just as a turning point." Nodded. "Me too. If you believe in healing, in redemption, in imperfect love that never gives up, hit subscribe." This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that it's never too late to say I'm sorry or I forgive you. Later that week, Ethan surprised me with something unexpected. A small framed print. It said, "You came to stay and I came back to life." I read the words twice, my throat tight. "You gave me more than a place to live," I whispered. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost." "My son, I didn't give it," he said. "I just found it again." That night, I wrote something in my journal, the same old notebook I'd carried through dark days, scribbling things I could never say aloud. Today, I forgave the past. Not because it asked, but because I finally knew I was free to live again. A few months later, I told Ethan I wanted to visit my hometown just for a weekend. He offered to drive me. We didn't talk much during the drive. The road was quiet, like our hearts. It's content, but alert, watching. When we pulled up to the small cottage where I'd grown up, I felt a strange mix of grief and peace. "This is where I learned to be a mother," I said. He looked around at the cracked windows and overgrown yard. "You made something beautiful out of something broken." I smiled. "Like you." Before we left, we visited Max's grave. The old dog who'd once been blamed for a toy car incident and had loyally followed me through every hard year. I placed fresh flowers on his resting spot and whispered, "We made it, old friend." Ethan wrapped his arm around me. "We should go," he said gently. I looked around one last time. "I think I'm ready now." Back home that night, I unpacked my bag slowly, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because anything grand had happened, but because I had finally accepted it. I was no longer the woman who had been left behind. I was the woman who stayed and was finally seen. Ethan knocked on my door as I was tucking the photo album into the drawer. "Hey," he said. "Just wanted to say good night." "Good night, son," I said softly. He hesitated. "Mom?" "Yes." "Thanks for not giving up on me." I smiled. "Thanks for coming back." He nodded. eyes glassy. Sleep well. I will, I whispered, for the first time in a long time. And I did no longer haunted by what had been, but held by what had become. Love, forgiveness, home.